Hi everyone, welcome back to our next episode in building our banking CLI application. Right, so in the last episode we implemented the account sign up feature. So what we did was so in the view, there's our render form. We collected registration data. We tried to do validation, but it didn't work out. So that's what we'll handle this episode. We generated account number. We hashed the password. Then we created our account record. This should be number 5. And then we also notified the user of success or failure. Right. So in this episode, we are going to add validation, because right now if you try creating an account with wrong data, there's nothing stopping you from doing that, and it might cause errors in our application. For example, let's try to create a new record. Let me comment this. Enable our menu manager. That's clear. Let's do sign up. Let's do, okay, we did validation for this, so that works. So let's do John Smith, right? Let's do the same email. Okay, that exists. Let's put, maybe we might want to have like a fixed length of password, or a minimum length for password, maybe 4 digits, 6 digits, 8 characters, sorry. So we might just put 2 to go. Then for opening balance, we could put maybe a text value like PHP, and there's nothing stopping our system from accepting it. However, it could cause issues when trying to save the record. As you can see, one, we have unique violations, which was due to the email. We have an email that exists, which shouldn't happen. So we need a way to validate without crashing it. And even if we check that, we don't want the user to have to fill everything again every time they make the mistake. We want to validate in place. So till everything is, till every validation we put there is, well, valid or is validated or it passes, then we want to go on to the next form field. So how do we do that? So we'll create a kind of way to add validations to our forms. Okay, so how do we do that? So first we would add a new property to our form field config called validator. So a validator is basically a function that validates a value. That's basically all it is. Okay, so we'll say private, and this will have an array. So we want to be able to pass multiple validators to a form field, for a form field. So maybe email could have required, which is by default there, and then we could have validation for email to see if that is a valid email. We could also have validation to check if that email exists in the system, so that the user would know and then have to provide a new email. Okay, for, let's say for password, we might want to do minimum length. Maybe we should have a minimum length of 8 characters. For what do we call it, for numbers like opening balance, we want to make sure it's a float value, okay, or at least an int. Okay, and if it's an int, we also need to validate it to confirm if it's not less than 0. We don't want to accept a value that's not less than 0, right? Okay, so we'll have this validators, right? It should be an array, and it can be passed optionally here. So we'll do question mark there, which would say it's optional validators, and if you don't pass it, to be null by default, right? And then we would do validators equals to validators that was passed in the constructor, and if there's nothing there, then we just initialize it to an empty array, right? So now that we have this, how do we validate? So first, what is a validator? Okay, so for us, a validator, okay, a validator is a function, okay, that returns let's see, okay, that returns, let's say, a string if, okay, the function that let's say it's a function that validates a user input, okay, validate a user input, it returns a string which represents okay, you can say if validation fails, it returns a string which represents the error message. Maybe I should do this in a new line, and then if validation succeeds, it returns null, right? So that's basically what a validator is. So let's see how we'll test the logic. Okay, so for validators, we're going to have a class. A validator is basically a function, but we want to put it in a class to help us easily manage them. But let's practice, okay, how the validation would work. So I think I can remove all this. Right. Okay, so let's create a validator. So let's say we want to validate what do we want to validate? Let's say email, for example, right? So I want to validate email. We could create something like an email validator, okay, which would be a callable. Callable is a function that can be called at a later time. So basically a function in a variable that when you want to use it, you can call it, right? An example would be okay, let's give an example of a callable. Let's say we have a function here. So that's a function print email, okay. Now this print email, when you call it, let's say it will just print the email. So let's say johnsmith@gmail.com, right? sorry. And then so this function, you can see it's a function, we could just call it here, print email, and it's fine, right? So let's clear, let's run that, fine. So what if we store this in a variable? Okay, so let's see, let's just call it printer, for example, and we do print email. Okay, so we just pass this function. So pass the function here. Basically, we're passing this here. Now, if we do a var dump of this, let's see what we get. Right, so they're saying it's a constant. Okay, so want to actually store this function here. So but we actually can't do that directly. So we could, if we want to store this function in a variable, we have to do it on declaration. So we say printer equals, and with that, if we save it, okay, what's there? Let's see what's there. Expecting. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay. Let's see. var dump, right? 9453. How is callables created again? Hold on. Am I getting old? Callables. Let's see, first class. No, not this one. Let's say I have a function I want to store in a method. How do I do that? Callables. Well, this is how I would have, but how do I create it? Yeah, so okay, yes, that's true. I won't specify a name. Yeah, so at this point it will be an anonymous function, right? Because the moment we specify a name, then it is a variable. So want to store this function in a variable. Okay, so at this point the name of the variable becomes the function name. So we could remove this and store that. Okay, so at this point, yeah, so now this is an expression, so we have to end line here. Right, so you can see now this, when we try to print it, you can see this is a closure. Think of it as a function, right? Okay, so however, if we want to execute this, all we need to do is to say printer this, and then once we do that, it actually executes whatever is inside that callable. So we want to use the same principle. Okay, we want to pass a function that does the validation, and then the function will return a string if it fails, and it will return null if everything is good. Alright, so let's do that. So let's say I want to do a way to validate email. We could say email validator equals function, but we need an email now. We need an email. So we could say string email, and then what do we want to do here? So we could say So let's just make it simple. Let's say if string contains, we pass the email, and we'll just check to see if it contains the @ symbol. Let's say once it contains that, it's a valid email, even though there are better ways to validate email. So we could use regex for that. Okay, so if it contains that, so we just return null, and if it doesn't, then we return invalid email address. Yeah. So at this point, if we call this, we could say response equals email validator. Remember, this is now the function, but the function is in here, and we can't just do this here, else we'll just be assigning this to this. If we want to execute it, we call it. But then this won't work, because when we declared the function, we needed to provide a value into it. Okay, but we do have an error. Let's see, unexpected variable response. This is on line 460. Let's see. Okay, yes, so we need to end line here. Okay, so we need to pass that email. So let's pass an email. Let's say meow, right? And then let's do a var dump. Let's say response, and then yeah. So this means this is incorrect. But let's say we put this. Yeah. So now it returns null. So we'll assume null is validation successful. So there are better ways to validate emails with regex for that. Okay, so we can do other type of validations as well. Let's say minimum length, and all that. Okay, so let's look at, so I want us to keep our validations in a place that we could just easily call them. So we could create a validator class, which will just be it will just be a class that holds our validations or our validation logic. Okay, so let's create our first validator function. So let's do let's call it valid email. Yeah, let's call it valid email, and this will receive I could just call it email. Yes, email. Then this would be just call it email, and remember this will return a string or null. We could just do what we specified here. So we'll say if str contains email followed by symbol, then it's a valid email. So we just return null, right? Or we could also put dots, but for now let's just or do we just get the regex for that? Oh yeah, let's get the regex. So where's Google? Let's do regex for email validation. I'm using private tab. I'm in for it. So let's do doc go. Let's see if they'll help us. Regex for email validation. validation. But not sure I want that. Let's check this out. Wow, 99% works. Okay, let's see it. Okay, so there is, wow, there's quite a lot of regex. Just want something sync. Wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. Okay. Please tell me out. Wow. All this just to validate email in PHP. I'm not sure want to keep that. Isn't there like a very simple thing that we can use? Just don't want it to be. We could use this, right? It's a valid to eject syntax. Let's try it out. I'm not sure if it will work as we expect, but let's try it. So let's say regex. Oh, let's just call it pattern. This is the pattern, right? And I believe we have a PHP function for that called preg match. Yeah, so this will help us with our regex. So when we do that, it returns like the match, which would that be false if it matches, or true if it doesn't match. So let's do if preg match. So has the syntax. Okay, we pass our pattern, and then we pass what we need to match it against. So which would be the email, and then if it matches, I'm guessing, so it return null, else return invalid email address. Right. So let's see that. Okay, so let's do response equals validator email, and let's pass meow. See what we get. Okay, so unknown modifier. Okay, I'm guessing plus doesn't work there. Not sure how it's supposed to, but it kind of validated it. We'll do something about this. I really don't know whether we can just remove that and it will work. Okay, yeah, it doesn't. So we need to find a valid way to validate this. No pun intended. Okay, let's see if this pattern works. I'm really not sure. Let's see if they have PHP. They don't. Okay, yeah, they do have PHP here. Is there a way to like copy the syntax somehow, or do I just take this and? Okay, let me comment this out. I don't know if this works, but let's see. Let's see. Uh-oh. So, let's remove that and see. I guess they were not expecting that. Alright, I think we'll just have to go simple, or maybe let's fix our let's do PHP here. Maybe that would help us a lot. So let's see that. Hopefully we can see something that isn't too long. I really just want. This is why I did. Oh yeah, thank you. PHP has this. But then for email they actually have this. I think we could use this instead of having to like validate. So yeah, let's use the filter var. I think that would solve our problem. So how do we do that? So we'll do filter var, I think. Then we'll pass the value we are filtering followed by the filter itself, which is just validate email. So if it's not true, so if it's true, we don't know. Beautiful. So let's see if that works. Great. And once we put a valid email, let's see. Okay, it failed, and as soon as we do this, yeah, success. Great. So let's see, what do we need to validate? So we've been able to validate email, which we need a, so let's highlight the list of validators we need. So we need an email validator, we need a length validator, let's say character, or let's just call it string length validator. We need what validator? We might need a validator to validate type, like if something is a number. So let's say numeric validator. We also need something to check if a value is greater than positive. So let's do positive number validator. This will be very useful for balance. Okay, so okay, positive number, positive or 0, positive number or 0. Let's do that. Right, and so we'll also need validators that can take yes, which is very important. So we need a validator for email exists. Yeah. Let's see, duplicate email, no duplicate email validator, or no duplicate account email. Yeah, let's call it that. Okay, so let's create these validators, right? So hopefully it doesn't take us much time. So we can do, but we've been talking about the validators, like how do we validate, like where do we actually test the validation logic? Okay, so one part of it is having the validators. We also need to validate it against the value. So we could say public, we'll create a function to do that. We'll say validate, which will take the value which will represent the value supplied by the form field. It's the value received from the user, and then we'll have this return to return a string or null, Okay, and we'll do a for each. So say for each validators, actually this validators as validator. Okay, so for each validator, then we would validate. So we'll say response equals to validator. Remember now, these closures, these callables will represent the validator. So they will be functions now. So which means we can call them and we'll pass the value received from the form input into this. So we can say value. Okay, so if it has a response, so if there is a value, so if this is not null, then we'll need to tell the user what went wrong, right? So do right line, let's do let's do validation failed, error, then we'll put the error here, which will be whatever received from the user's response, and then we break. So there will be no need to yeah, we could return so we would want to return this. We really don't want to handle the error here. We want to handle the error where we'll be using this function, which would be in the form. So the form will be responsible for handling the validation. Okay, here would just be to return this would just be to run the respective validators, right? So let's not handle it here. So if the response is not null, then we return the response. Okay, else we return null. So if this runs and there is no error, then we'll just return null. In fact, we could actually return the response here. Okay, that works as well. Or we could get the validators and validate in the form function. Yeah, I think that's actually what we're supposed to do. Maybe we shouldn't validate here, we should validate there. Okay, so let's cut this, and we'll just expose a function get validators, which will return the validators to us. So say validators, and then here where we are validating the form, we will get, once we've read the data, so we'll store the value somewhere. We'll say let's call it input, right? Then we'll get the validators equals to config get validators, and then we'll do this logic, which basically would be this. Alright, so let's take this out. So for each validator, so now which should be this validator, and then we'll pass that. So if we get a response, we print out the response here, and then we want to keep the user here as long as the response is not valid. Yes. So we could do a while loop, while true, and wrap this. This is for the for each. So we'll wrap this in a while loop. So basically we're saying we would get whatever the user provides. Here we get the validators. We go through each validator, we validate the input. If it's not null, we print the error response. Okay, and we don't so at this point we break out from this. Okay, yes, so we break out from this, and we continue. Okay, but if we go through the validators, okay, and we get a value, okay, so this will break. So we need to ensure, so when do we break out of the loop? When do we break out of the loop? So if we have an error, we print this and we break, which just goes here. Okay, so we could do response is null. Okay, so response has something, we're already breaking here, and we'll continue. And here we'll do a check. So if response is equal to null, then we can break from the infinite loop. Alright, and this will lead us to go on to the next form. So let's test that. Okay, so we have email validator. So let's see if this works. Let's see if this works. So we enable our menu manager. Let's run this to make sure there's no errors. Okay, so sign up. Let's do, so for sign up, let's pass valid email. So here we'll say validator, right? Remember, this is a static function. Okay, so we do email, right? So we just pass it like that. Remember, it's a callable. Alright, so let's test this, right? So let's do 2. Okay, undefined constant. What's the issue? Okay, sorry, we need to return from this. So we need to return a callable. Right now it already has a name. Yeah, it already has a name, so we can't assign it, and we can't just create it like that. So this is more like what we'll call a factory function. So what we want to return is we want to return everything here. So we could do return function, or let's do it like this. Return function this, then we can see, so this type, want to move the type here. I want to say this is a callable. Yes, so this will return the function that would handle the validation, right? Let's see if all is good. let's see. Okay, yes, we need to end line because now this is an expression, right? Right, so let's do, we still have this error. Hold on. Undefined constant. Must this be static? I doubt. Oh, no, it mustn't. So we are. Oh yes. Yes. So this is it. So yes. We've not returned this. This would be out. Yes. Alright, so let's see what's next. What are we missing? Okay, I need to call this because I need to call this to return this function. So that's what we need to do. So yes. Beautiful. Alright, so note we are creating an anonymous function. This is the function that will do the validation. This, okay, and the aim of this function is basically to create the validation function. So that's why we are calling it to return the function. So the function is what we are returning. That's why you can see we've specified the type as callable. So let's test to see if it works. Let's say John as name. So let's put any name, right? Okay, so let's see undefined variable value. Let's see. Made a mistake somewhere. So okay, yes, input, not value. So let's do input. Right. So maybe I want to put some comments here. So let's say read input value. Or let's say read input from user. This is case. It's kind of clear, but let's do get validators for this form field. Let's see, iterate through all validators for this form field. Okay, to say validate input. Okay, so here I can say validation field show error. Okay, this one. So we are breaking here so that we don't run. Okay, fail on first validation. We don't want it to proceed to validate. So if we have, let's say we have email validator and duplicate email validator. If email validator fails, we don't want to continue with the duplicate email validator. We want you to fix that email validity first, and then we can do the duplicate. So that's why we are breaking here. Okay, so no validation errors. Go to the next form field. Yeah, so that's basically what we're doing here. Alright, so let's run it again. Let's say John, let's say email, meow, you can see validation field, error, email invalid email address. Maybe we might want to put some, maybe some, I don't know, maybe something like this. That makes the UI nice, but let's just see it. let's just see it. Okay, so let's do John, let's do meow. Okay, I think it looks nice. Maybe you guys can suggest something better, but this works for now. Okay, it's up to you guys to customize it as much as you want. But let's put a valid email. Let's put the wrong one. Okay, it fails. Let's do, yeah, so it works. Great. And maybe we might want to like add a line after each form rendering, but we could look into that. Okay, so it works. Right, so let's create some validators. Right. Oh, cool. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so string length, yeah, we need to have one for name, so we'll just do minimum length for now, but we could also do maximum length as well. So let's do function length. Now when validating length, we want to take the mean. Max can be optional, but we would want to specify the max as well. So let's do max, and this will return a callable to make sure that we are not this is not the validator itself. What is in there would be the validator. So we'll do return function, we'll pass the value, so let's call it value, and then so right now remember this function only accepts one value, because when we call it, we're only passing the value the user specified. Okay, in fact, let's call it value so that it doesn't. But then how do we pass these two into this function? Well, we can use the use keyword and then say mean, max. Okay, then return this and handle our validation here. So we could do length equals str len value, and then we'll see if length is greater than, let's say it's less than mean. Okay, want to throw an error, so we'll see return let's say, okay, let's say minimum character. Okay, let's see you must provide a minimum of mean characters. Yeah, so let's return this. Else, if length is greater than max, okay, if length is greater than max, there's actually a maximum value in PHP. You might want to check that. Okay, but there's something to look out for. you can say you must provide a maximum of max characters, else then everything is fine, just return no. Right, so that's for the length validator. So this will be useful when we want to validate, let's see, yes, name. So for name, we want to have a validator length, and then we'll pass, let's say, minimum 2 characters, maximum, yeah, what's the maximum for, okay, we say name should not be more than 100, so let's make that our maximum. So let's see if that works. Errors, yes, always errors. So let's check. 37, where did we, okay, yes, we didn't, this is an expression, I need to keep remembering that. Why? Line 43, what did I do wrong? Okay, I didn't end this, I didn't close this. Okay, so full name, let's do M. Okay, failed, you must provide minimum of 20 characters. Nice. So let's provide quite a lot of characters. Pretty sure they reach for 900 now. Wait, what? Ha! They shouldn't be more than, let's check. What did we, okay. If this is this, return this, else if length is greater than max, right? You must provide a minimum of something. Are you telling me that's not up to 100 characters? No, I don't believe that. Okay, I'm going to put this, definitely has to be more than 100, definitely. I don't know how long I have to put this, but let's just do it. It just has to be more than, I'm pretty sure. Yes. So let's do John Smith. It works. Okay. So one more validation down. Alright, so let's do numeric. This will be useful for our number validator. For the balance. So we want to make sure the user should provide a numeric value. So let's do public static function. Let's say is numeric. Let's call it that. Now remember, this is a factory function. It just creates the function that will do the validation. It is not the validation. It's not the validator itself. We'll return the validator from the function. So we'll say function. Remember, we have to always provide that value. And the reason why we say string is because we only accept string from the read line. Okay, we only accept string from there. Yeah. So also we might have a bug somewhere. If you check our read line, right, it returns no. What if we say it's required, we say required is false, and we supply a validator? Won't this fail? So we need to also check, okay, if the value is null, so that we don't even run the validator itself. Okay, we could have validators for null, but I don't think it would be useful. So we could skip running the check if the value is null, and we don't want any of the validators. Okay, but then because it makes if it's required, then if it's null or if it's optional, then there's no point having a validator. Like, what are you going to run the validation again? So we'll likely do a check there. But we'll keep that in mind. So let's do string, right? Remember, string represents our error. So what do we want to check if a value is numeric? Well, PHP will help us with that, and we can say if is numeric, which is a function in PHP, pass that value, and if it is numeric, let's say if it's not numeric, then we return let's say you must provide a numeric value. Let's tell them that. And then if it's not, then return null. Good. So let's use this. Maybe not now. Okay, let's use this for account and see if it's really working. Okay, I keep forgetting this. It's an expression now. So where do we need to put it? So opening balance. Let's do validator is numeric. Right. So let's try to validate to say John. Let's see, meow.com, it works. Not done any for password. Let's do meow. So it fails because meow is not a number. But then if we put, let's see, -40, it worked. So what was failed here? Okay, why did this fail? Oh yes, we have a bug. So after the validation is successful, we don't store the input in that form, in the form data. We don't store the value or the valid value in the form data. So we need to fix that. So where is that? So here. So at this point, remember we had something like this here. We have something like form data, then we pass the field like that. But now we aren't storing that at all in there. So we'll need to store that here before breaking out of the loop. So we'll do form data, field followed by the input. But then notice that the input itself has not been transformed. It's still a string. Okay, so we'll leave it up to the part of the code that is going to use the data after it has been validated to handle the transformation. But we might want to, well, we won't complicate it, we'll leave it like that. So let's check this time. Okay, let's say John, yes, password, the -40. Okay, now there's a problem. So we should actually have an account with an opening balance of 40. This is a debt. So that's where validation is very, very useful when when receiving input from the user, or even generating this input. You don't necessarily have to receive it from the user. So let's create that validation to prevent us from that problem there. So let's say static. The one we need is positive or zero. Positive or zero. Do we say positive number or zero, or positive or zero? Positive. Yeah, positive or zero. I think it's intuitive already. So we turn a function which will be expecting a value. Turn a string. Remember, this is an expression. And then we're going to see, first we need to transform it. I want to check if it's numeric first, so that we don't even have to proceed with the validation. So we can see, maybe we might apply this. So if it's not a number, then we'll do this. Okay, then we try to convert it to a number. So say number equals, now this is where the issue is. Do we convert it to a float or to an integer? That's also another thing. I think float is safe. So let's do value, and then we can say if number is less than, less than 0. Yeah, because remember I said positive or 0. So we can say then you must provide a positive number or 0. Yeah, so let's do that. Else we return no. Great. Okay, so everything is coming into shape. So we'll need this. I remember validation runs in the sequence at which they were provided. So say validator positive or 0. So I think for opening balance we're good. Password, yes, we need a minimum length validator. So let's do length, right? We'll say minimum of 8, and we can say maximum of 50. Yeah, let's do that. Well, technically it could be longer, but you're on your own if you forget. So I think we are good. Okay, we aren't done yet. So there is one more validation we've not done, which is this one. So there's actually this one, but this will come useful when we going to make a transfer. Okay, because we don't want you to send money that's 0. So maybe we'll handle it when the time arrives. Okay. So let's do the note. So we want a situation where, because this is a situation we want to prevent, right? We don't want a user to be able to use an email that exists on the system. So we want to validate against that. So let's say 90. Yeah, we want to prevent this type of SQL constraint validation errors. Okay, so we want to have a validator that can check if an email exists. Okay, so let's do that. So we'll see public static function. Let's see, what do we call it? let's say no no duplicate account email. Let's call it that. I think it's quite straightforward, quite intuitive. So say return function, remember it accepts a string, the validator returns a string or null. Remember this is an expression. So what do? We will do if account entity find one by username, pass that email. So if this is not null, if what we get here is not null, look, we don't really need the variable, so we're just skipping it. So we'll check directly in the if condition. So if it's not null, then we can tell the user an account with the specified email already exists. Yeah, and if all is fine, then return null. Yeah. So let's use that here. So we'll do that after validating if the email is correct. Beautiful. Right, let's try it. Okay, line 470. Where did I go wrong? Oh yeah. Wait, did it fail before? Oh, we didn't run it before. Okay, so let's do John. Let's use the same email. Let's try to use wrong email. Okay, so now let's use an email that exists. Now we have the validation error. You can see that. Okay, and okay, we can bring up our previous inputs. Let's try it again. Okay, it failed, but now let's say at gmail.net. Nice. So we need to remove this existing database. So existing. So let's comment this out. We don't need it. And let's also comment this. We don't really need that. I think we're good. Right, so I think we have our validator set. So we've created a way to validate our forms and ensure that we try as much as possible to reduce invalid data in our system. So in the next video we will continue the feature, which will be the login feature. Alright, see you guys in the next one.